A German soldier shovels coal into a locomotive firebox. Seconds later, the entire train explodes. No bomb, no saboteur. No evidence, just coal. Except it wasn't coal. It was a British weapon so secret, so perfectly disguised, that German investigators never understood what was killing their trains. And by the time they figured it out, it was already too late. Welcome to History of World War II. What if I told you that one of Britain's deadliest weapons weighed less than half a pound and looked exactly like a lump of fuel? To understand why the British created fake explosive coal, you first need to understand one thing. Nazi Germany ran on railways. By 1941, Hitler's forces had conquered most of Europe. German soldiers occupied territory stretching from the French Atlantic coast to the gates of Moscow. They controlled millions of square miles. They commanded millions of troops, and they moved almost everything by train. Troops, tanks, ammunition, food, fuel, medical supplies, replacement parts. The Deutsche Reichsbahn and the captured railway networks of occupied nations were the arteries keeping the German war machine alive. Without trains, the Wehrmacht could not fight. Without locomotives, Germany could not hold its empire. Road transport consumed precious gasoline and diesel. Germany was already desperately short of fuel. Every gallon burned by trucks was a gallon that could not power a Panzer or a Messerschmitt. But railways consumed coal. And coal was everywhere. Germany controlled some of the largest coal deposits in Europe. The Ruhr Valley, the Silesian coalfields, the mines of occupied Poland and Czechoslovakia. Coal was abundant. Coal was cheap. Coal could be stockpiled in massive piles at every railway depot across the continent. This dependency on coal-powered railways created something the German High Command never anticipated: a vulnerability, a catastrophic vulnerability. And British intelligence saw it before anyone else. The problem facing British planners in 1941 was deceptively simple. Destroy enough German locomotives and you cripple their entire logistics network. Simple in theory. Almost impossible in practice. Railway tracks could be repaired in 24 hours. A team of forced laborers could replace damaged rails overnight. Cutting track was almost pointless. Bridges were heavily guarded. German troops patrolled major railway bridges around the clock. Machine gun positions, searchlights, guard dogs. Any resistance fighter attempting to plant explosives on a strategic bridge faced almost certain death. Railway yards were fortified. Locomotives were kept in protected depots. Armed patrols swept the perimeter. Conventional sabotage required trained agents to infiltrate railway infrastructure, plant explosives, set timers, and escape before German security discovered them. Many tried, many died. The casualty rate among resistance fighters attempting railway sabotage was horrifying. For every successful attack, multiple agents were captured, tortured, and executed. British intelligence needed something different. Something that required no technical expertise from resistance networks. Something that could be planted by anyone with access to a coal pile. A factory worker, a railway laborer, a cleaning woman. Something that would destroy locomotives from the inside. Something invisible. Here's where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Hidden in the English countryside of Hertfordshire, a secret facility was already working on the answer. Station the 12th at Eston House near Stevenage served as the primary research and production center for the Special Operations Executive. So was Britain's Sabotage and Subversion Organization, tasked with setting Europe ablaze through unconventional warfare. The facility had been relocated there from Bletchley Park in November 1940. The reason was almost comical. Explosives testing was disturbing the codebreakers working next door. Every time Station 12 detonated a test charge, the cryptanalysts trying to crack Enigma lost their concentration. So moved its weapons factory to Hertfordshire. Under Colonel Leslie Wood, Station 12 became a nightmare factory for the Third Reich. The numbers are staggering. During the war, This single facility produced around 12 million time pencil detonators. These were small, silent fuses that allowed agents to set explosives and walk away before detonation. Station the 12th also manufactured over 38,000 limpet mines. These magnetic devices could be attached to ship hulls by frogmen, sinking vessels hours after the saboteur had disappeared. But among Station 12's most ingenious products was something far simpler. Explosive devices disguised as ordinary lumps of coal. If you're already hooked on this story, hit subscribe. The next part reveals how they actually built these weapons. The technical challenge facing British engineers was deceptively complex. The device needed to look exactly like real coal. Not similar, not close enough. Exactly identical. German soldiers and railway workers handled coal every day. They knew what it looked like, how it felt, how much it weighed. Any device that seemed even slightly wrong would be spotted and discarded. The explosive coal also needed to survive rough handling. Coal was thrown onto piles, shoveled into tenders, kicked around by workers, dropped from considerable heights. The device had to withstand all of this without detonating prematurely. But it also needed to explode reliably when it entered a locomotive firebox. The temperatures inside a working firebox exceeded 1,000 degrees. The device had to ignite at high heat but remain completely stable at normal temperatures. British engineers solved this with a combination of plastic explosive and clever camouflage. Each device contained approximately a quarter-pound of plastic explosive from the Nobel chemical family. This was a malleable, putty-like substance that could be molded into any shape. Unlike dynamite or TNT, plastic explosive was remarkably stable. It could be dropped, thrown, or even shot without detonating. Only heat or a proper detonator would set it off. The explosive was paired with a standard detonator and a heat-sensitive fuse. When the disguised coal entered a locomotive firebox, the intense heat would ignite the fuse. The fuse would trigger the detonator. The detonator would set off the main charge. A quarter-pound of plastic explosive alone would cause serious damage. But the real destruction came from what happened next. The explosion itself was only the beginning. A working steam locomotive operates under enormous pressure. The boiler contains superheated water and steam at several hundred pounds per square inch. This pressure is what drives the pistons and turns the wheels. Without pressure, a locomotive cannot move. When a quarter-pound of plastic explosive detonated inside a firebox, it ruptured the boiler wall. What happened next was catastrophic. All that pressurized steam released instantly. The boiler essentially became a bomb. Metal plates that were designed to contain pressure became shrapnel. The entire locomotive tore itself apart from the inside. The fireman operating the shovel was killed instantly. The engineer in the cab rarely survived. The locomotive itself was reduced to twisted, unrecognizable wreckage. And here was the genius of the weapon. There was no evidence. German investigators arriving at the scene would find a destroyed locomotive. They would find casualties. They would find massive damage, but they would find no bomb fragments, no timer components, no detonator residue. Everything had been consumed in the firebox and the subsequent explosion. All they would see was what appeared to be a catastrophic boiler failure. Equipment malfunction, metal fatigue, manufacturing defect, human error. Pick an explanation. Any explanation. None of them pointed to British sabotage. But here's the question that should be forming in your mind right now. How did they make fake coal look real enough to fool trained eyes? Station the 12th built the explosives, but making them look real required different expertise entirely. Station the 15th at the thatched barn in Borehamwood housed SOE's camouflage section, and its staff were not soldiers or scientists. They were film professionals. Lieutenant Colonel Elder Wills ran the operation. Before the war, he had been an art director in the British film industry. He understood something that military planners often missed. Creating convincing fakes required artists, not engineers. Wills recruited over 300 film production workers, prop makers, and craftsmen. These were people who had spent their careers creating illusions, building sets that looked like castles, crafting props that looked like ancient weapons, making actors look like monsters. Now they would make bombs look like coal. Among the recruits was a young prop maker named Wally Bull. After the war, Bull would work on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. During the war, he perfected the art of making explosives invisible. Production methods evolved through 3 distinct phases. The earliest technique was crude but functional. Engineers would take actual lumps of coal and drill them using a 6-inch serrated tube. This created a cavity in the center of the coal. They would fill this cavity with plastic explosive and detonator, then conceal the hole with coal dust mixed with glue. Laboratory assistant Arthur Christie conducted many of these early experiments. He later described inserting about a quarter pound of explosive into each drilled lump. But this method had problems. Coal is brittle. Real coal often shattered under drilling pressure. Production was slow. Failure rates were high. The film professionals at Station 15 developed a better approach. They created molds. Using dyed plaster, they cast fake coal shells that looked exactly like the real thing. These shells came in 2 halves, like a clamshell. Workers would place the explosive charge inside, seal the halves together, then coat the entire surface with real coal dust. The result was a perfect replica. But there was still a visible seam where the 2 halves met. The final refinement eliminated even this flaw. Engineers encased the explosive charge in thin metal. They suspended this metal container inside a mold. Then they poured liquid plaster around it. When the plaster hardened, they had a seamless fake coal lump with the explosive already inside. No drilling, no seams, no visible evidence of tampering. Perfect. But making one perfect fake coal bomb was not enough. Coal is not universal. Different regions produce different types of coal with different appearances. Lignite is brown and relatively soft. It comes from younger geological deposits. German lignite mines in the Rhineland produced millions of tons annually. Anthracite is nearly black and very hard. It has a distinctive glossy surface. Welsh anthracite was famous throughout Europe for its quality. Bituminous coal falls between these extremes. It shows various colors and lusters depending on its origin. This was the most common type used in European railways. A brown lignite bomb would be instantly spotted in a pile of black anthracite. A glossy device would stand out in a pile of matte coal. SOE manufactured variants matching each major coal type. The camouflage section at Station 15 created multiple templates. Different colors, different textures, different shapes, different sizes. Devices could be matched to local fuel supplies anywhere in occupied Europe. A resistance fighter in Belgium would receive bombs matching Belgian coal. An agent in Norway would receive bombs matching Norwegian coal. Partisans in Yugoslavia would receive bombs matching whatever coal the Germans were using in their sector. This attention to detail made the weapons nearly undetectable. Nearly. We're about to reach the production numbers. They're bigger than you might expect. Make sure you're subscribed. Between 1941 and 1945, SOE produced approximately 3.5 tons of explosive coal. Think about that number. 3.5 tons, at roughly a quarter pound per device. This suggests somewhere between 6,000 and 14,000 individual weapons. Every single one a perfect disguise. Every single one capable of destroying a locomotive. Distribution relied on Royal Air Force Special Duty Squadrons based at RAF Tempsford in Bedfordshire. No. 138 Squadron and No. 161 Squadron flew Halifax, Stirling, and Lysander aircraft on supply drops across occupied Europe. Their missions were some of the most dangerous of the war, flying at night over enemy territory, navigating by moonlight, dropping supplies to resistance networks in forests and fields. By war's end, these squadrons had flown over 13,000 sorties. They delivered more than 10,000 tons of supplies to resistance fighters. Weapons, ammunition, radios, medical supplies, money, and explosive coal. The French resistance received the largest share. SOE sent 470 agents into France between 1941 and 1944. Each agent established networks. Each network received supplies. Belgium received explosive coal. Norway received explosive coal. Poland received explosive coal. Yugoslav partisans under Tito were among the groups supplied with these devices. Given their constant attacks on German railway supply lines, the weapon was likely employed within their broader sabotage campaigns. Thousands of fake coal bombs scattered across occupied Europe, waiting. Now here is where the story becomes strange, and troubling, and historically complicated. Despite 3.5 tons of explosive coal produced and distributed across occupied Europe, documented records of specific attacks remain remarkably sparse. No named operations. No specific dates and locations. No confirmed locomotive kills appear in declassified sources. This absence demands explanation. The first explanation is the most obvious. The weapon was designed to leave no evidence. A successful attack would appear as an accidental boiler explosion. German investigators finding wreckage would attribute the destruction to equipment failure, not sabotage. That deniability was the entire point. If explosive coal worked as intended, successful attacks would be historically invisible. We cannot count what was designed to be uncountable. The second explanation is bureaucratic. Many SO records were deliberately destroyed after the war. Churchill had created the organization to conduct deniable operations. When the war ended, many people wanted those operations to stay deniable. Files were burned, reports were shredded, archives were sealed. What remains classified 80 years later may contain the answers historians seek, or those answers may have been deliberately erased. The third explanation is statistical. Railway sabotage in occupied Europe was so extensive that attributing specific damage to any particular method proved impossible. The French resistance conducted over 1,800 attacks on locomotives between June 1943 and May 1944 alone. They used every available method. Explosives placed on tracks, bombs thrown into engine cabs, rifles fired at engineers, sand poured into lubricating systems. Explosive coal was one weapon among many, but there is something we can document, that proves the weapon mattered. The true impact of explosive coal may have been psychological rather than physical. Once word spread that coal piles might contain hidden bombs, Germany faced an impossible dilemma. Option 1. Accept random catastrophic explosions in locomotives, ships, and factories. Let crews continue shoveling coal with the knowledge that any piece might be their last. Accept the unpredictable equipment losses. Accept the terror spreading through the workforce. Option 2. Guard every coal pile across occupied Europe. Inspect every lump of coal before use. Redeploy thousands of troops away from combat duties to watch fuel supplies. Screen millions of tons of coal by hand. Neither option was acceptable. Accepting the risk meant unpredictable losses and terrified workers. Railway crews became anxious. Factory workers became suspicious. Ship stokers became paranoid. Fear spreads. Guarding coal meant withdrawing forces from an already overstretched military. Every soldier watching a coal pile was a soldier not fighting partisans, not guarding bridges, patrolling borders. The Germans understood this threat intimately because they developed their own version. This next part reveals something that happened on American soil. Stay with me. June 1942. 2 German submarines surfaced off the American coast. U-202 landed 4 men on Long Island. U-584 landed 4 men in Florida. All 8 were German saboteurs trained by the Abwehr, Nazi military intelligence. Their mission was Operation Pastorius. Among their equipment, investigators later found plastic explosives molded to resemble coal. Their targets included coal-fired power plants and railroad infrastructure across the United States. The plan was simple: infiltrate, plant explosive coal, destroy American industrial capacity from the inside. All 8 were captured before executing any attacks. 2 of the saboteurs turned themselves in to the FBI. Their confessions led to the arrest of the others. 6 were executed by electric chair. 2 received prison sentences. Germany never attempted similar operations against the American mainland again. But the episode proved something important. The Germans recognized the value of explosive coal. They had developed their own version. They were willing to deploy it against their enemies. They just could not defend against it when used against them. There is another episode that reveals even more about German coal bomb technology. Eddie Chapman was one of the most remarkable double agents of the Second World War. Before the war, Chapman was a professional criminal, safecracker, fraudster, escaped prisoner. He was in a Jersey jail when Germany invaded the Channel Islands in 1940. Chapman volunteered to spy for Germany. The Abwehr trained him in sabotage and wireless communication. They gave him the code name Fritz. Then they parachuted him into England. Chapman immediately contacted British intelligence. He offered to work as a double agent. MI5 gave him the code name Zigzag. For the rest of the war, Chapman fed carefully crafted misinformation to his German handlers while pretending to conduct sabotage missions. The British staged fake explosions and planted fake newspaper stories to convince Germany that Chapman was their most successful agent. In March 1943, Chapman's Abwehr handlers gave him a special assignment: sabotage the merchant ship city of Lancaster. They provided him with 2 German-manufactured coal bombs. Chapman immediately handed both devices to the ship's captain. The captain passed them to MI5 for technical analysis. British intelligence examined the German weapons carefully. What they discovered was revealing. German coal bomb construction lagged behind British innovation. The Germans were still drilling real coal. They had not developed the sophisticated molded designs that Station 15 was producing. Their camouflage was good, but not perfect. Britain was winning the coal bomb race. So what was the ultimate impact? Did explosive coal actually matter in the grand scheme of the war? The answer partly lies in what happened across the Atlantic. The American Office of Strategic Services was watching British developments closely. OSS was America's wartime intelligence organization, predecessor to the CIA. Their research and development branch under Stanley Lovell developed an American version of explosive coal. They codenamed it Black Joe. The American design used different explosives. OSS preferred a 60/40 mixture of PETN and TNT, called pentalite, rather than the British Nobel formulations. The detonation characteristics were similar, but the materials were locally produced. But OS went further than simple production. They developed specialized coal camouflage kits. These kits contained paints, brushes, pigments, and tools. They allowed field agents to customize standard explosive devices to match local coal varieties anywhere in the world. An OS agent in China could match Chinese coal. An agent in Burma could match Burmese coal. An agent in Germany itself could match whatever coal the target was using. Both organizations, British and American, recognized the weapon's potential even if documented results remained elusive. We're approaching the climax. The real numbers of what railway sabotage accomplished. Whether explosive coal contributed significantly to overall numbers matters less than the total impact of the railway sabotage campaign it supported. The results were devastating for Germany. French resistance attacks achieved roughly a 60% reduction in rail traffic in key sectors between March and June 1944. As Allied forces prepared for D-Day, German railways in France were bleeding capacity. Around 480 attacks occurred in the days surrounding the Normandy landings. These strikes prevented German reinforcement of the beaches. Panzer divisions that should have counterattacked on June 6 were stuck hundreds of miles away. Their trains could not get through. In Yugoslavia, maintaining rail transport required what one German general called enormous problems and heavy railroad security detail. Estimates suggest that massive German forces were tied down protecting railway infrastructure rather than fighting partisans or preparing for Allied offensives. Contemporary documents emphasized one crucial point. Destroying locomotives specifically inflicted disproportionate damage compared to cutting track. Could be repaired in days, sometimes hours. Locomotives required months of factory work to replace. A destroyed locomotive was a permanent loss. Every locomotive killed was one that would never return to service. And there were only so many locomotives in occupied Europe. The concept pioneered by So did not die in 1945. The influence of explosive, coal, extended far beyond the Second World War. CIA historical reviews note that given the importance of coal to economies on both sides of the Iron Curtain, future historians may need to explore how such devices featured in later covert operations. The weapon pioneered what became standard doctrine for disguised explosives. Consider what SOE created at stations 12 and 15. Explosive coal. Dead rats stuffed with plastic explosive for factory furnaces. Explosive logs for fireplace assassinations. Landmines disguised as animal dung. Every modern improvised explosive device concealed in everyday objects traces its lineage back to these wartime innovations. The principle was simple, devastating, eternal. Hide the weapon in plain sight. Let the enemy deliver the bomb to its own target. Leave no evidence. Create fear as much as destruction. Today, security forces worldwide train to detect explosives hidden in ordinary objects. Airport scanners, bomb-sniffing dogs, X-ray machines at government buildings. All of this traces back to a secret facility in Hertfordshire, where film prop makers learned to disguise bombs as lumps of coal. Surviving examples of explosive coal reside in museums today. The Imperial War Museum holds several specimens. The International Spy Museum in Washington displays examples. The Museum of World War II in Massachusetts maintains additional pieces. 16mm test footage filmed at Station 17 by cameraman Cecil Clark still exists in archives. It shows the weapons being manufactured, being tested, exploding with devastating force. 80 years later, we can watch the evidence of British ingenuity. A secret facility hidden in the English countryside. British engineers stood around a workbench covered in lumps of coal. Except these were not lumps of coal. They were weapons. Instruments of destruction designed to look so perfectly ordinary that German soldiers would shovel them directly into locomotive fireboxes without a second thought. 3.5 tons of explosive coal manufactured. Thousands of devices distributed to resistance networks across occupied Europe. An unknown number of locomotives destroyed in explosions that German investigators attributed to equipment failure rather than sabotage. So explosive coal represents unconventional warfare at its most sophisticated. A weapon measured not in confirmed kills, but in fear. In resources diverted. In fundamental uncertainty injected into every coal pile across Nazi-occupied territory. British engineers solved a problem others had not even identified. They recognized that Germany's dependency on coal was not just a logistical fact, but a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. They turned the enemy's own fuel supply into a weapon against them. And they did it with a quarter-pound of plastic explosive hidden inside fake rocks that German soldiers shoveled into their own fireboxes. That was British engineering. That was so. And that was how fake coal helped destroy the Third Reich from the inside. War demands innovation. Sometimes the most elegant solutions are the simplest. A lump of coal, a quarter-pound of explosive, a heat-sensitive fuse. No complex machinery, No massive factories. No army of technicians. Just cleverness, patience, and the willingness to think differently. The men and women who created explosive coal never received public recognition. Their work remained classified for decades. Many took their secrets to the grave, but their legacy endures. Every invisible weapon, every disguised explosive, every act of sabotage that left no trace. All of it began with fake coal in the English countryside. If this story gripped you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Next time, we'll explore another secret weapon that changed the war. One that was even more audacious, even more deadly, and even more invisible. What if I told you there was another British invention that killed more German soldiers than explosive coal? A weapon that was never fired, never detonated, never even touched the enemy. A weapon made entirely of lies. That story is coming soon. This is History of World War II. See you in the next one.